Hi everyone, it's Emily here and I'd like to welcome you to the third annual Canada Day video hop. Happy Canada Day! As the host of this event, I'm joined by 14 of my fellow Canadian YouTubers and we're featuring a variety of crafty projects featuring products from Canadian stamp manufacturers, artists, online shops, and publications. We also have 15 generous sponsors giving away over 20 individual prizes worth over $1,000. I will share more on these prizes at the end of this video. Pigment Craft, a new Canadian company that I introduced in last year's hop, is one of our generous sponsors and I'll be featuring their products in my video. I combined products from the last few releases and used pigment inks on my projects. I've linked to all of these products in the description below, and you can also visit my blog for a full visual shop list as well as a full hop list. Pigment is offering a $100 gift certificate on the hop by leaving a comment at any stop. The more you comment, the higher your chances of winning. And Pigment is also offering a second $100 gift certificate on Instagram, so be sure to pop on over there for another chance to win. Every purchase of $200 on the site will earn you $15 to spend later. Be sure to watch till the end for more offers or visit my blog for details. For my first card, I'll be using the Spring Flower Stencils. Wish Upon a Dandelion stamp set in coordinating dies, and the Bitty Diagonal Striped Stencil. For my second shaped card, I'll be using the Jumbo Candy Die Oh Hi stamp set in coordinating dies, a Note of Hand stamp set, Ribbons and Wreaths stamp set and dies, and the Sweater Weather stamp set. The color palette for my two projects includes the following ink pads, which are from the second ink release. The colors include Blush, TAJINE, Rosewood, FICUS, Lagoon, Juniper, and Balsam. Let's get started on my projects. The Spring Flower Stencils are a set of 5 stencils, and they don't actually layer over top of each other, but rather add color to the stenciled images based on the previous stencil. I'll show you what I mean by that. Each stencil is etched with the step number so you can easily follow along. I've trimmed a 6x6 panel, which will give me an entire image of this size, and then I can choose which part of that panel to use for my A2 card. I start with the first stencil, and I'm going to be splitting these images and using 2 different colors. I use Ficus and Lagoon, and I'm using the small Catherine Pooler blender brushes that I've designated to each pairing of pigment inks. For the second stencil, I use Balsam to add detail to the leaves. The third stencil is offset because it matches up with the flower on the bottom left, and since it's not lined up with the cardstock panel, I use removable tape to hold it in place. This stencil will create the inner part of the flower as well as details for the outer petals. The ink color I use here is TAJINE. The fourth stencil lines up with the base of the flower and the outer petal sits right up against the center of the flower. To keep it perfectly in alignment, I use removable tape and wrap it around the panel. The ink color I use for this layer is Blush. I also use Blush to color 3 of the smaller flowers, which are also included in this stencil. Then I go back and use Lagoon for the other 2 flowers. For the fifth and final stencil, I line it up with the empty space in the center of the flower and once again tape it in place. The ink color I'm using here is Rosewood, and it's one of my favorite colors in the pigment palette. I also use this color to fill in the 3 blush flowers. Then grab Balsam to ink up the centers of the 2 Lagoon flowers. Here's a look at the finished panel. It's so pretty, isn't it? I would love to leave this as a 6x6 card, but it's a little too big. The wonderful thing about this is you can choose which part of it you want, and you can create a regular A2 panel in the portrait or landscape setting, or you can also create a 5x5 square card and even 4 3x3 mini cards. Using an A2 die can help you determine how the card will look. I wanted to add some texture on this stenciled background, and my camera wasn't turned on, so I'll show you on a separate panel how I got these embossed lines using the Bitty Diagonal Striped Stencil. This is the Spellbinder's Platinum 6 machine, and it's my favorite machine for die cutting. It's also the best machine to dry emboss stencils with. I place the stencil down on the platform, then the cardstock. Over top of that, I add the embossing mat, which will push the cardstock into the crevices of the stencil, and then the embossing plate on top of that. After running it through, you get a really nice texture from the lines in the stencil, and you can do this with any stencil for so many beautiful patterns. This really increases the versatility of your stencils, and I have some other videos showing this technique as well. Next, I'm going to stamp the Hi Lovely sentiment from the Wish Upon a Dandelion stamp set. I love Pigment's combination sentiments, and this is no exception. Being able to stamp this single sentiment in 2 different colors makes me so happy. What I've done here is place a sticky grid mat in my mini Misty stamping tool, and I've die cut the sentiment twice from the panel so I have 2 pieces to stamp on. Having the die cut makes it easy to line up the 2 stamps, and it doesn't have to be perfect to look fabulous. I'm using balsam ink to stamp the Hi, and you can see me rubbing or prepping the stamp with my palm. I always do this with new stamps, and it allows the ink to stick to the stamp and provide better coverage with no bubbling. In the event there's a missing spot, like there is here, one of the tricks I use is to take a fine, stiff brush and dip it directly onto the ink pad, then use it to paint the spot or fill it in. It's better than stamping it again because that would completely change the saturation of the color. Next, I stamp Lovely in blush ink and stamp it twice. I feel that it's too plain, so I aim for an ombre effect. I use a blender brush to add TAJINE ink to the bottom of the sentiment. I feel like that's not enough, so I add 2 layers of rosewood ink, which brightens it up considerably. Now it's perfect. I trim the panel down to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches and add a second layer so it would pop up a bit more on the card base without having to use foam tape. Then I use glue dots to layer the stamped sentiment on silver glitter cardstock. Instead of using foam tape to pop up the sentiment on the card, I die cut 2 more layers of the base using white cardstock, glued those together, and attached it to the back of the silver glitter layer. With the help of a T-ruler, I make sure the sentiment is straight before gluing it down on the stenciled panel, and now my card is done. On to my second card. I used the jumbo candy die to cut 2 base layers using the larger die and 2 complete layers using both dies together. Since this will be a shaped card, the 2 solid panels will make up the base of the card, and the 2 detailed layers will make up the candy details of the card. The second layer will make the stripes look recessed and create dimension. Next, I'll use the ribbons and wreaths stamp set to create bows, which tie the 2 ends of the candy. And I'll create the sentiment using the Oh Hi and a Note of Hand stamp sets. Similar to the sentiment on my first card, I again use a sticky grid mat to position the bow die cuts, which will help me line up the stamps. The Ribbons and Wreaths stamp set is a 4-part stamping set, which creates shadows, making it look like real ribbon. I start with juniper ink and follow the numbered pieces on the set. Next, I move to balsam ink. For the third step, I go back to juniper ink, and for the final step, I stamp again in balsam ink. When I stamp in juniper, I ink up the stamp twice, and when I stamp in balsam, I ink it up once. I love the results of this stamp. The bow is so pretty and versatile. I stamp it 3 times, and the bow looks different but awesome each time. It gives me different choices, so I choose 1 bow for each end of the candy. Next, I ink blend the different insert pieces starting with blush ink. I work my way inward with TAJINE and rosewood. Then I use lagoon for the end pieces since wrappers are usually clear or translucent. Now I can stamp the sentiment, and I use balsam for O and lagoon for Hi. I discovered that the tiny heart from the sweater weather stamp set fits perfectly into the hollow heart in the letter I, leaving a white border around it. I use rosewood to stamp the little heart, and it's so pretty. I take the Sweets word from the A Note of Hand stamp set and place it vertically on the letter I. I use balsam ink to stamp this. I test out a silver glitter base layer, but it doesn't look right. It's just too busy, so I switch to a white border. To bring in that silver element, I die cut the word O from silver glitter cardstock and cover up the stamped version. I glue the 3 sentiment layers together, then assemble the pieces for the candy. I attach the first detail layer to the front of the card, and then add each of the ink blended pieces into their respective spots. After that is done, I add the top detail layer, which makes the colored areas look more recessed. Next, I use foam tape to pop up the sentiment in the center of the card. I also use foam tape to attach the ribbons. When that is all done, I score the back piece, which is where the card will open, and the sender can write their note to the recipient. After gluing that piece to the card, my second card is done. Here are my two cards using the same color palette. The candy card trades the FICUS color for juniper, and I noticed that it makes a great horizontal card too. I was going to cut off the overhanging ribbon in case it interfered with it being able to stand up, but it doesn't seem to affect that, so I'll leave it as is. I do love shaped cards, and I don't make them often enough. I had so much fun creating with these incredible products from Pigment Craft. If you haven't heard of this company, please do go check them out. As I mentioned earlier, Pigment is also offering an additional $100 giveaway on Instagram, a gift with purchase, and there are two different sales. The 20% off sale using code CELEBRATECANADA and a 30% clearance sale. I'll have all those links below as well as on my blog. Thank you so much for joining me today for the Canada Day video hop. A big thank you to our very generous sponsors who've donated over $1,000 in prizes. If you're new to these companies, please go check them out. In addition to the giveaways, please look for the list of sponsors who are also offering generous shop discounts with various timelines and discount codes. All of this information is listed on my blog. Thank you for supporting these Canadian businesses that provide us with so much crafty inspiration. Be sure to leave a comment here and then click on the link in the description below to head to the next YouTube video in this hop. Comments will close at 11:59 p.m. Eastern on Friday, July 15th, and the winners will be announced on Friday, July 22nd. Please check back to see if you've won. If you enjoyed today's video, please click on the subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Be sure to head to my blog for all the details, more photos, and a full supply list. Thanks so much for watching!